I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, immigration and border security come up again on Capitol Hill, what Congress did and didn't do today. Also tonight, doctors walk the picket line at UC San Diego. We'll tell you why they staged a one-day strike.
Laura's Law is a step closer to being implemented in San Diego County. I'm Peggy Pico with how it would change treatment for some people with severe mental illness. And Plato at the Googleplex, Why Philosophy Won't Go Away. It's the title of a new book and the focus of my conversation with its author about the relevance of philosophy in today's hectic world.
And San Diego's newest YMCA is now open for business. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Leaders in the House are putting off action on a border security bill while they consider a lawsuit against President Obama's executive actions on immigration. The bill postponed today would penalize the Department of Homeland Security if it fails to stop all illegal border crossings within 5 years. Critics say the bill was unrealistic, and the Border Patrol's union says what they need are more agents with better equipment. Those were not in the bill. It did call for more fencing and a fleet of drones, even though Homeland Security says drones aren't a good use of taxpayer money. At the same time, congressional Republicans are reportedly working on a lawsuit to try to stop the president's actions to protect millions from deportation. Associated Press quotes a source at a closed-door meeting with House Speaker John Boehner, who told lawmakers the legal plan is being finalized. The House has already passed bills to overturn the policies, but they're not likely to make it through the Senate. Top Sinaloa cartel leader faces charges tonight in San Diego and 6 other U.S. jurisdictions, but law enforcement here will have to wait to get their hands on Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Mexico's top prosecutor says Guzman won't be extradited to the U.S. until he gets out of prison in Mexico, and he says that could take 300 or 400 years. Guzman was Mexico's most wanted man until he was arrested last year. About 150 doctors and dentists at the University of California student health centers statewide held a one-day strike today. The union and UC system have been trying to hammer out their first contract. The union accuses UC of unfair labor practices, saying they've refused to share essential financial information, and both sides remain far apart on staffing.
2 part-time psychiatrists on campus. We don't feel that that's adequate staffing for a campus of this size with well over 25,000 students.
UC officials declined to discuss specifics, but they maintain the best way to resolve differences is at the bargaining table, not a strike. New England is taking the brunt of the big blizzard of 2015. Nearly 21 inches, look at this, fell at Boston's airport with winds of more than 70 miles per hour. Some eastern states got almost 3 feet of snow. Nearly 8,000 flights were canceled at the East Coast airports. Meanwhile, at Lindbergh Field here in San Diego, more than 20 cancellations because of the weather back east. A bomb threat delayed another flight this morning out of Lindbergh Field. Passengers hadn't yet boarded the Southwest Airlines flight. The plane and the passengers' luggage were searched. The flight took off for Dallas more than an hour behind schedule. There were several similar incidents you may recall around the U.S. over the weekend. Federal agents say they take these threats very seriously, and anyone making them can be prosecuted. What can $30 million in confiscated drug money buy? How about an armored personnel carrier? That's just one of the things San Diego law enforcement picked up over the past few years through the federal government's asset forfeiture program. iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda has been looking into how the money is being used here. Leo, can law enforcement use this drug money for anything they want?
Well, there are some rules about what individual departments can pay for with this money. Some, like the Sheriff's Department, paid for overtime and salaries for staff working on wiretaps. Other departments use them for one-time expenses. For example, National City Police upgraded their fleet of cars. Oceanside Police bought a mobile command vehicle and a Bearcat. We went down to their station to check it out.
This vehicle is a Lenco Bearcat. Lenco is a company out of Massachusetts, and while it looks intimidating and fearsome, that's not the purpose. Everything about this vehicle is designed for safety and ballistic safety. This is a non-military vehicle. That is to say, this vehicle wasn't designed with the military in mind. This was designed with law enforcement and law enforcement applications in mind.
Now, to be clear, Oceanside Police later gave the money back to the forfeiture fund because they got a Homeland Security grant to pay for it.
Still, it seems like these seized assets have turned out pretty lucrative for law enforcement agencies.
It has, and the program has been criticized because under the previous rules, in some situations, cops didn't even have to charge someone with a crime before forfeiting his money or property. Still, Lieutenant Martian in Oceanside told us that the money doesn't motivate his department.
Not this, but a vehicle that we have reason to believe was funded for or funded through illicit means, let's say drug sales or human trafficking. And we don't just go up to a man and say, hey, that's a nice F-250. We sure would like to have one of those in our inventory. There's a way we get to that. We're not just going up to people that are just not engaged in criminal activity. There's a established pattern of where did they get their money, and it comes down to they don't have a job, but they're driving around in an Escalade, and they have all this jewelry on, but there's no legitimate funding source there. I mean, this person tells me they're flipping burgers at McDonald's or something, and then there's something that's just not adding up overall. So it's not. We don't just run around and seize people's stuff.
Now, Leo, Attorney General Eric Holder recently announced changes to the federal program. Do the changes put an end to those asset seizures?
Not at all. Holder announced that the federal government will no longer adopt the money and property local cops seize. That means local law enforcement agencies can still seize assets, but they have to do it under California's asset seizure laws. Those are more restrictive in some cases than federal rules, but they still allow cops to use some of the drug money that they confiscate. And local departments can also continue getting drug money from the federal government from joint operations and task forces. We've got a database of San Diego law enforcement purchases online at inewssource.org/forfeit.
iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda. Some San Diego social service agencies are getting $16 million from the federal government to help the region's homeless. The funds will be used to pay for continuing programs and to start new ones. The grant amounts range from $1.9 million for the San Diego Housing Commission to just over $600,000 for Path Connections housing. Tomorrow, residents also get a chance to help the city's homeless at the annual Project Homeless Connect. It's an all-day, one-stop shop event providing haircuts, flu shots, warm meals, and much more. More than 850 people participated at the last event this past December. It looks like there might be new limits on the amounts of money donated to candidates running for county offices. Supervisors tentatively approved new caps. The limits could be $25,000 for district races and $50,000 for county-wide offices. 2 years ago, the city set similar limits. A final vote by the county is scheduled for February 3rd. County says if approved, the limits would be reviewed and adjusted every 2 years. Supervisors also directed the health department to develop a plan to implement Laura's Law. Peggy Pico explains how it would impact some mentally ill folks who refuse treatment.
Laura's Law, named after Laura Wilcox, who was killed by a mentally ill man in 2001, has been a state law for a decade, but it's optional for each county to adopt the law. Here with the next steps for implementing Laura's Law in San Diego County are my guests, Supervisor Dave Roberts and Teresa Bish, former chair of the Mental Health Advisory Board. And Supervisor Roberts, this law has been on the books, as I said, for 10 years. Why try to implement it now?
Well, when state laws are passed, if they have a financial component to it, they are optional. And so when I came on the board back in 2013, one of my priorities was to look at what mental health services we could offer and try to make improvements. I partnered with Supervisor Diane Jacob. One of the many tools that people asked us to consider was Laura's Law. We've looked at it for 2 years. The Mental Health Board recommended we implement Laura's Law. Today, we approved a plan to begin looking at the implementation of Laura's Law.
Who would fund it? Where would the money come from?
So there are state funds that are available for this. Senator Darrell Steinberg changed funding formulas so that counties can get state funding for this. So I believe it's just another tool that we can use here in the county.
And Teresa, there's already a legal option called a 5150 that allows people who are either a threat to themselves or a threat to others to be involuntarily put in a hospital for 72 hours. How is Laura's Law different?
Laura's Law is very different. First of all, it's civil law, so the person doesn't have to do something criminal or be subject to an involuntary hold necessarily to be offered assisted outpatient treatment. So in other words, this is a preemptive legal structure that allows an individual not to have to degrade to the point of crisis before a 5150 is able to legally be called.
And you said there's about 9 different conditions. What are some of the top conditions?
Well, they have to be over the age of 18 and primarily known to this county, meaning they've had a hospitalization and or an incarceration. So they're just not compliant then with the treatment plan.
And until this year, only one county in California has used Laura's Law for any length of time. I know LA had a partial implementation of it. So what have we learned from Nevada County, who used it, and also LA?
Well, we've learned that there's an enormous fiscal savings because no longer does that person warrant a hospital stay, which is much more expensive than the existing outpatient treatment programs that they'd be allowed to access. Furthermore, they inhibit incarceration, meaning they don't have to degrade to the point where they're a threat to themselves or others. They're not doing anything illegal. So there's an enormous savings due to an inhibition to need incarceration.
Right.
And
it's
so,
a different way of, a different place of treating them, actually.
Actually, it is a different place of treating them as an outpatient. And then we know that people are realizing recovery, they're getting jobs, they have a quality of life has improved enormously.
So you've seen a lot of different benefits from this, but Supervisor Roberts, disability advocates and the ACLU are opposed to Laura's Law. They said that it reinforces stereotypes, that that mentally ill people are violent, and it kind of takes us a step backwards to the bad old days of involuntary commitments or committals to hospitals. What is your response to those concerns?
Well, I've met with the ACLU through my staff. I respect their opinion. I just disagree with them. Those bad horror stories are a thing of the past. We have so many different requirements now in place to make sure that people's rights are protected. And you mentioned the 72-hour hold. We've also implemented a 14-day hold and a 30-day hold, new tools that we've offered. And Assemblymember Marie Waldron, a Republican from Escondido, is actually submitting legislation to require all counties to carry out Laura's Law now without the funding. So there's a lot going on in this area.
What is the next step, if you could tell me very briefly, after the county health develops the implementation plan?
So we've asked for the plan to be brought back to us so that we can vote and make sure that it's what the board wants. We want our Behavioral Health Advisory Board to have a role in this and make sure that we're really heading in the right direction. So this was a big step forward today, but there's a lot of work still ahead to get this tool in place.
All right, County Supervisor Dave Roberts and Teresa Bish, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
70 years ago today, Russian forces liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. The AP's Hannah Buchwald shows us how the day was remembered there and across Europe.
Holocaust survivors gathered at Auschwitz in Poland on Tuesday to commemorate the liberation of the concentration camp 70 years ago. They laid wreaths against what became known as the Wall of Death and paid tribute to lives lost during the Nazi occupation.
In our minds, we are still here, even if we are not here in person. And we want to underline that the children of Auschwitz are standing here today.
I gave up anger a long time ago. Why? I'm not, because you're not going to accomplish anything.
Germany also marked the somber occasion with a memorial ceremony in Parliament.
Es gibt keine deutsche Identität.
There is no German identity without Auschwitz. To remember the Holocaust is a concern of all Germans, of all who live in Germany.
In Paris, French President François Hollande laid a wreath inside the Holocaust Memorial Crypt. He later addressed an audience of French survivors of the Nazi camps, seeking to reassure them that Jews have a home in France and vowing to battle anti-Semitism in his country and around the world.
I am making you this promise, a commitment. France will never forget, and with the documents, the testimonies that you have left, the books, the texts, the recordings, and this place, which is yours, we will never forget.
Auschwitz still stands as a symbol of the horrors of the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were killed by Nazi Germany and its allies. The Soviet Army liberated the camp on January 27, 1945, as World War II was coming to an end. Hannah Buchdahl, Associated Press.
Someday soon, driverless cars will be on California roads, but first the state has to make sure they're safe. Today in Sacramento, the DMV held a public workshop on regulating self-driving cars. The manufacturers want to do it themselves, but consumer advocates say that's not enough.
Not relying solely upon representations made by self-interested parties who seem awfully eager to get into this space. Safety may not be there. I believe safety is not their leading concern. I think that's pretty obvious.
California's regulations may be completed in the next few months. A Marine who lost both legs in Afghanistan will find life a little easier thanks to a new home being built for him in Fallbrook. The Gary Sinise Foundation raised the money to build a smart home for Staff Sergeant Jason Ross, who is now in a wheelchair. The home will include roll-in bathrooms, front-load washers, and automated doors. Ross has been through more than 200 surgeries to get to this point. He says the house will help restore his independence.
This means a lot for myself, and it means a lot for the men and women of the armed forces. And I'm just glad that I'm going to be able to actually have my own home for the first time. And it's been a long road, and like I said, it's one step closer, and soon I'll be home.
And that home will be ready later this year, letting Ross live closer to his 2 children. The Gary Sinise Foundation hopes to build more than 30 custom smart homes for severely wounded veterans around the country this year. San Diego's Mid-City neighborhoods have a new YMCA dedicated to strengthening kids and families regardless of income. Price Charities purchased the site of the old Pearson Ford dealership at El Cajon Boulevard and Fairmount Avenue.
Pearson Ford, they stand alone at Fairmont and El Cajon.
From a place where San Diegans used to kick the tires and haggle with salesmen to a new state-of-the-art facility serving as a vehicle to connect people of diverse cultures and backgrounds, the Copley Price Family Y is open for business.
It's been a long time coming. I think we broke ground about a year and a half ago, but it's been in the works for much, much longer than that. Our old facility was almost 60 years old, and it needed a lot of love and a lot of work.
Inez Thomas has been working with the board of directors for 7 years and is proud of the programs for kids.
It's just so beautiful to have a facility where the children can come. We have a teen center. We have lots of little rooms for the little kids. It's just going to be so good for the kids, and that's my heart. The kids are my heart.
Membership fees range from a low of $25 a month for teens and $40 for adults, with special rates for families and financial assistance to help more people access the facility regardless of their economic situation.
We soft opened almost 2 weeks ago, and every single day we've had anywhere between 50 and 150 people sign up every day. So obviously it's a well-needed facility, and there's a lot of excitement.
One official described it like going from a Volkswagen Bug to a Cadillac. It cost $34 million to build the Y. It features a fitness center, soccer arena, and gymnasium, as well as a demonstration kitchen, play fountains, and 2 swimming pools.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next NewsHour. Our second report from London, how Europe is struggling to combat extremism at home. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
4 years ago, physicist Stephen Hawking declared philosophy was dead. But Peggy Pico's next guest argues it actually remains as relevant as ever.
What would Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, think about the internet, global politics, or religion today? Would he be surprised to find that we still ask many of the same questions about life as we did more than 2,000 years ago? Here with a look at why we still wonder is my guest, philosopher Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein, author of Plato at the Googleplex, Why Philosophy Won't Go Away. And Rebecca, in your book, you bring Plato into current-day America, and I'm wondering, what can Plato teach us in this modern day with debates over religion, politics, wars, and things like that?
Well, he can teach us to question, he can teach us to reflect, he can teach us to be more self-conscious about our beliefs and our actions, not to take things for granted. And that's been one of the major roles of philosophy from the very beginning.
The subtitle of your book, Why Philosophy Won't Go Away. I have a few ideas. We're super busy. Parents are working, technology, trying to keep up on that, and just everyday life, keeping yourself alive seems like one reason. So how is Plato's philosophy relevant today, and why should we, as you say, contemplate these questions?
Right. So, well, one of the things I don't want to say is that Plato had all the answers. I mean, this is a man who lived 2,400 years ago. He started this process of trying to look very reflectively and at our beliefs, at our actions, and we've made a lot of progress. That's one of the major things I want to claim in this book. We've made a lot of progress over the millennia.
Progress in philosophy?
And even philosophy, and most importantly, the kinds of questions that concern all of us in moral philosophy. And we've become more morally coherent. And the way that we do this is that we have, as Plato himself and Socrates, his teacher in ancient Greece, had recognized, we have a lot of inconsistencies. We're very compartmentalized. We have beliefs as human beings. We're very complicated. And he developed a method of sort of looking inward and questioning, not just inward, but it's a very social activity. We question each other. We hold each other accountable for our beliefs and our actions, and we make progress this way.
So, speaking of progress, physicist Stephen Hawking and other scientists say, listen, philosophy is dead. They say because it hasn't kept up with science. Instead, they say speculating about nature is what philosophy does, and when they're actually, as scientists, discovering the nature of things.
Yes.
What is your response to that argument?
Well, they are not understanding the nature of philosophy. Philosophy is not in competition with the natural sciences. I come from a background in physics. I'm actually came from a scientific orientation. If philosophers are trying to compete with scientists in telling us the nature of physical reality, then philosophy is indeed absurd. But that's not what philosophers are in the business of doing. It's true that if you look at the long history of our cognitive voyage, a lot of the questions that scientists now deal with and answer were first proposed by philosophers. In fact, all of physics was once called natural philosophy. Psychology began as a branch of philosophy.
So you're saying that they're not in competition as you see it. Who do you consider today to be the most influential living philosophers?
Let me think. It depends on what area of philosophy you're talking about. So I think one of the most important ethical philosophers was the man who actually was my PhD dissertation advisor, Tom Nagel, who wrote a book called The Possibility of Altruism, which I think was a tremendous step forward in ethical knowledge.
Altruism.
Altruism, yes. Why altruism is a rational choice, why it's justified, why acting in the interests not just of ourselves but of others is actually required if we're going to be morally consistent.
Now, you're in San Diego for a lecture at UC San Diego tonight. What do you want people in the audience to take away from this lecture?
I want them to take away the importance of these questions, realizing that they are on some level always wondering about these questions, wondering about what it all means, what matters. Science may be our best, it is our best methodology for answering what is. But when it comes to this other set of questions that concern all of us, what matters? Do we matter? What matters? Does truth, does goodness, does beauty, does status, does fame, does money? What matters? We should look at, these are deeply philosophical questions. We should look at this discipline.
All right, Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein, author of Plato at the Googleplex. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peggy.
Cooler weather continues with a slight chance for some rain in parts of the county. Sunny at the beaches tomorrow. Temperatures will dip into the 60s Thursday and Friday. A mix of sun and clouds for the inland valleys. Temperatures taking a slight dip on Friday as well. Mountain temperatures back into the 50s with a chance for rain on Thursday and Friday. Cloudy in the desert, mostly in the 70s there. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. After nearly 2 decades, San Diego could get its first legal medical marijuana clinic. We'll take a look at the long road to get to this point. And on Midday Edition at noon tomorrow, we talk with San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer and ask him your questions about everything from road repair to the new Chargers Stadium task force. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.